All right, in this lesson, we're going to be talking about finding the inverse of linear functions. Remember yesterday we found the inverse of our graphs or our pictures by drawing the identity function, which is y equals x, and we picked any point. So if I pick the point -2, +3. If I reflect it over the line, -2, 3. If I reflect it over the line y equals x, all I have to do, because these are the same, is switch my coordinates. So the reflected point would be 3, -2. And that makes sense because if you look, it looks like you folded this line over onto itself. Okay? What we're going to do today is look at some graphs. Okay? And whatever the graph looks like, it's just going to flip over this line or reflect over this line. So if the graph looks like this, when it flips over, it might look like that. Okay? In order to do this, we first have to figure out what are the equations of these graphs. So if you look at number 1, this is telling me that f of x is 4x minus 5. Okay? F of x is just a fancy way of saying y. So this really says y equals 4x minus 5, which is just going to be a linear equation, okay? In order to figure out what the inverse function is, which we notate by f of -1, you just read this as the inverse. Remember we said for the points you would just switch x and y. So to find the inverse function, you switch x and y. And then you put it back into y equals form. So in order to do this, I would have to add 5. I want to get y all by itself. Add 5, add 5. Okay, so now I'm at x plus 5 equals 4y. In order to solve for y, I have to divide by 4, divide by 4. So the inverse, or f of -1, so f -1 of x, that's what this looks like, is x plus 5 over 4. Now, in order to test these out, I'm going to put this in the graphing calculator, and I'm going to put my inverse in the graphing calculator, all in the y equals screen. Okay, so all I'm going to do is right there in the y equals, I'm going to put 4x minus 5. And then I'm going to put, in parentheses, x plus 5 over 4. So it should look like that. Okay? If I hit graph, there's one of them. There's the other one. And the calculator died. That's good. So very quickly, if I were to put a line right here, it looks like I folded it onto itself at that point. Okay, that's how you can test that they're inverses. Going back to this one, again, this is just a fancy way of saying y equals x over 6. So this is one equation. My inverse happens when I switch y and x, and then solve for y. So 6x's equals y. Okay, so my inverse would be 6x. Again, I'm just going to throw these in the graphing calculator. You don't have to do this every time, but it is helpful to see that they are actually inverses. So my first y equals would be x over 6 and the second y equals would be 6x. Okay, if you do that correctly, it should look like this. Okay, here's what I put in my y equals screen. And I hit graph, and it looks just like that. So it looks like I folded it on the line, that would go right through here of the identity function, which is y equals x. Okay, I'll do a few more with you guys, and then I'm just going to post the answers on the Google Classroom so you can check them. Okay, I'll do 3 and 4, and then you guys can check the rest. So number 3, all I'm going to do is notice that this is my y, and then I'm going to switch them. So x equals 2y over 5 plus 4. I want to get y by itself. I can't do anything with this fraction yet until I move over the 4. So x minus 4 equals 2y over 5. In order to make this fraction turn into 1, remember I can multiply by the reciprocal, which would be 5 over 2. When I do this, this becomes 1, this becomes 1, and multiply this by 5 over 2. I would distribute just the 5, so 5x minus 20 over 2 is my new function. Last one, this is y, switch them. Now, this whole thing is a fraction, which means I would like to turn this into a 1 by multiplying this by 4 and this by 4. This becomes 1, 4 times x is 4x. Add the 5. And then lastly, divide by 2. So here's my inverse, 4x equals this, okay? Go ahead, do the rest of these, numbers 5 through 16. I'll put the answers on the Google Classroom. Go ahead and check them.